welcome Stratters. My name is Bobgar and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about a deck that I've been running recently. It's called Hatedrazi for Hate Bears and Eldrazi kind of mixed together. I saw it 5-0ing some constructed leagues and I thought it would be a fun one to play, especially because I already had a kind of mono white Taxis Hate Bears style deck, so I had a lot of the pieces already. Share some of the pieces with Merfolk too in terms of things like Aether Vials. So yeah, I figured I would give it a shot because it wasn't that much more money and it looked like a lot of fun. So let me walk through the deck with you real quick. I will start with the mana base. The mana base is not super exciting. It runs Caves of Koilios, and the reason it runs these is because not only do they produce white and black mana, but they also produce colorless mana, and colorless mana is important for both casting some of your Eldrazi's. I'm going to sort by converted mana cost here. Casting some of your Eldrazi's like Thought Knot and Reality Smasher, and then also activating abilities of Eldrazi Displacer. In addition, you run 4 Eldrazi Temples. The reason is pretty obvious. It allows you to get your Eldrazi out a lot faster and activate your Eldrazi Displacer's ability more. 4 Ghost Quarters, again, is colorless source, so you can use them for Eldrazi. Also, it works really well with Leonin Arbiter. Often you can just turn it into a strip mine, and you care about lands less than your opponent in general just because you're running the Aether Vials, which allows you to cheat out creatures. Then also some Godless Shrines. You run Godless Shrines instead of fetches because, I mean, dual lands are good and you don't want to have to search yourself because you don't have to pay for your own Arbiter if you can help it. Then 2 Plains, a Swamp, boring, obvious stuff, and then a Shambling Vent. It's just a good dual land that you can turn into a creature late if you need to. I found it useful a couple times. The life gain is pretty relevant. Then the 1-drops. Path to Exile is one of the best removals in the format, and then with Leonin Arbiter, often you can even shut off its search for land effect, so you just make it a 1-for-1 with an Exile. Exiling is also pretty relevant in this deck, as we'll see. Aether Vial, again, to cheat in creatures. Some of the creatures you have are super good to cheat in. Tidehollow Sculler isn't bad, and then Flicker Wisp is awesome to cheat in on end step just because your opponent will lose whatever permanent you flicker until the end of their next end step, or the beginning of their next end step, so they lose it for all of their turn. You can do it to things like lands too, just to cut them a land short for a turn and things like that. 2 drops, Leonin Arbiter I talked about a little bit. It's a 2/2 for 2. Players can't search their libraries. Any player may pay 2 mana to ignore this until end of turn. So basically, best case, you flash this thing in or put it in a way your opponent's not expecting it, and it just screws them over so they don't get, you know, a fetch land or something. And worst case, it slows them way down because they have to pay for their fetch lands. Thalia is a 2/1 first strike for 2, and she has non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. As you can see, we're an almost completely creature-based deck. The only non-creature spells we run are Aether Vial and Path to Exile, and then a little bit in the sideboard. Yeah, she's just tends to be very one-sided, very powerful. If your opponent plays a lot of spells in general, it'll just slow their game plan way down, and it'll give you a huge advantage. I'm running 2 Sarah Avengers right now. These I would probably cut. They're really just 3/3 Flying Vigilance for 2, which is, I mean, it's very good. You can get them in on turn 3 with Aether Vial if you play an Aether Vial turn 1. But I don't think they're as strong as some other choices. I just happen to have them, and I didn't want to pay for the other things that I saw decks running, and I saw a deck run these in 5-0 with it, so I figured, you know, they're decent. I think their big problem is just that they die to Lightning Bolt. If I could, I would have placed with another Reality Smasher and probably, what's it called? Spellskite to eat abilities, and then also, obviously, Spellskites can't just be bolted, which is really nice. And the last 2-drop is Tidehollow Sculler. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand, and you choose a non-land card from it, exile that card. When Tidehollow Sculler leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. So this is just a pretty good ability in general. A lot of times there's only 1 or 2 cards in their hand that are relevant anyway. You can take their creature wipes if you're worried about that, because the deck is a little weak to that. You can take whatever combo piece they have. You can just basically take whatever it is that's their big scary thing. And then it also has a lot of neat tricks in this deck. Both Flicker Wisp and Eldrazi Displacer can flicker it, and if you can flicker it before after you cast it, if you can flicker it before you have to resolve its enter the battlefield effect where you look at your opponent's hand, the ability will be stacked such that the leave play will happen before they enter the battlefield, so the card you exile with that will be permanently exiled, and you'll also get to exile a second card which would go under it. So yeah, a lot of neat tricks with that. Eldrazi Displacer is one of the big engines for the deck. It works really well with Flicker Wisp. Flickering Flicker Wisps can be super powerful. Like I said, it works pretty well with Tidehollow Sculler. Not bad with Wasteland Strangler. And same with Thought Knot. There's a lot of good flicker targets, and obviously you can just flicker your opponent's stuff to get through for damage because it brings them back into play tapped. So a lot of times you can just flicker your opponent's creature just to tap it and then burst through for the damage you need. Flicker Wisp is a 3/1 flyer for 3. When it enters the battlefield, exile target permanent and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a pretty cool card. Like I said, you can use Eldrazi Displacer to flicker it. I like doing it on your own end step. So you can Eldrazi Displacer, flicker your Flicker Wisp. When it comes back into play on your end step, you can target one of your opponent's permanents, even like a land or something, and they lose that for their entire next turn, including their main phase and combat and all that. It doesn't come back in until the end step of their turn. So that's the way I probably find most useful, but there's lots of ways to use it. You can exile your own stuff too. Sometimes I exile one of my own lands and bring it back into play so that I have Path to Exile up. Things like that. Wasteland Strangler is a 3/2 beater. When it comes into play, you can give target creature -3/-3 by taking something from exile of an opponent's and putting it into their graveyard. Like I said, you have lots of things that exile. Flicker Wisp exiles, although only temporarily, but you could grab that thing from exile and put it in their graveyard, which would make it permanent. Thought Knot Seer exiles, Tidehollow Sculler exiles, and Path to Exile exiles, not surprisingly given the name. So there's lots of ways to do this, and so a lot of times it's just a 2-for-1 that also gives you a 3/2 left behind, and 3/2s are not terrible. And yeah, definitely 2-for-1ing is great, so that's the reason he's in the deck. Thought Knot Seer is an amazing card. It's a little bit like Tidehollow Sculler. It's a 4-mana 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, your opponent reveals his hand. You choose a non-land card from his hand and exile it. That exile is permanent. Then when it leaves play, your opponent gets to draw a card. It does suck sometimes when your opponent just has no cards. You play this, it gets killed immediately, and all you've done is drawn your opponent a card, but that's very, very rare. Usually it's a 4/4 beater, which is very good, and it also takes out whatever your opponent's best card is. So yeah, in general, this card is awesome. And then one Reality Smasher. Like I said, I wish I had a second one. This is just kind of the super big threat in the deck that your opponent has a lot of trouble dealing with. Trample and Haste are awesome. 5/5 is big enough to deal with most things in Modern, and it's very hard to single target kill because when it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, counter it unless that opponent also discards a card. So he has to kind of 2-for-1 himself just to get rid of it if he wants to. So that's the main deck. It's pretty tricky. You can do a lot of cool things with it. Taxes decks in general I find a lot of fun to play just because they're so interesting and interactive and there's so many lines. I probably screw them up a lot, but they're there. And then this is not the sideboard I used in the first couple of videos I recorded, but I changed around a little bit. But I'm going to show you this sideboard. Basically, I think the big thing I did was I took out a bunch of Oblivion Rings just because with Thalia, they ended up being 4 mana a lot of the time, and that just seemed too expensive, even though Oblivion Rings are nice because they combo with Wasteland Strangler, and they're just good cards. I was like, my original thought was like, Oblivion Ring, and then you get rid of it with the thing it's exiled with Wasteland Strangler, and then you flicker the Oblivion Ring with Flicker Wisp to exile something else. It sounds great, and it's good, but it's just a little too expensive, so I went a little cheaper on the sideboard. Relic of Progenitus is Graveyard Hate. I usually don't bring it in against like Snapcaster decks and things like that, but against like the super heavy graveyard decks, Vengevine, Living End, things like that, this card just shuts them down, and it's great. Pithing Needle, again, shuts down a lot of decks. Obviously, Planeswalkers it'll shut down, and it's just a very versatile card that's often, in certain matchups, you really, really want them. You can shut off certain combos, too. Dryad Militant, this is the card that I like to bring in against Snapcaster decks. It's a 2/1. It also makes your deck a little bit more aggressive, which is nice. It's a 2/1 that your opponent kind of has to deal with, and if you play it early, it basically makes their Snapcasters useful until they do get rid of it, because all of the instants and sorceries that they're trying to get into their graveyard instead will be exiled, so they'll have no Snapcaster targets. Duress is great. It can shut down some combo decks pretty well, and it can also just you know, against a white, blue, red control deck, take out their counter spells that are going to keep you from doing what you need to do. So in general, I like having them in the sideboard. I run them sometimes. Relic Warder, again, very situational, but very good. Exile target artifact or enchantment until it leaves play. So very similar to the Tidehole Sculler or yeah, things like that, except it's a permanent that's already in play. And it's great against in certain matchups. You know, you can exile a problem artifact or like a worm coil or something, and you can do the same trick where you take the thing it's currently exiling, put it back in their graveyard with this, and then even flicker this again to get another, you know, exile trigger. Core Firewalker is good against red matchups, especially burn, zoo, things like that, where protection from red is super relevant. So he's a 2/2 for 2, protection from red. Whenever a player casts a red spell, you may gain a life. So yeah, that's very good. Aethersworn Canonist, again, good in a variety of matchups here or there. I think the big one is Storm, because what it does is each player who casts a non-artifact spell this turn can't cast an additional non-artifact spell. So yeah, it shuts off things like Stormer, or a lot of cantrip decks, a lot of things that want to play more than one spell in a turn. It can even be okay against like Burn and Zoo and things like that that are just trying to dump their hand, or Affinity. Mirroring Crusader, double strike, protection from black and from green, obviously comes in against black-green decks just because it's one of the best beaters possible in those situations. Shriekmaw is a little bit more removal. You can also do cool things with the Evoke. You can pay its Evoke and then flicker it, so you get 2 destroy triggers and it comes into play without dying. So yeah, that one can be pretty cool. I will say my sideboard is definitely non-optimal. I just don't have some of the sideboard cards that I see people running that I think are really good, like Stony Silence is an obvious include. Probably Rest in Peace would make the cut over some of the cards here. And so there's a couple cards like that that are probably better than what I'm running, but what I'm running is still pretty good. These are good situational cards that give you a leg up in a lot of matchups that you are likely to see. So yeah, that's the deck. I will do matches in a few, and I will see you guys later.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, it really helps us out. You can find us on Twitter at MagicGathStrat, Facebook /MagicGatheringStrat, or on the web, magicgatheringstrat.com. There you can find articles and free prize-supported leagues. This is all brought to you by our Patreons and cardhoarder.com. If you enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/MagicGatheringStrat.